Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Omaham Jyotirgamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Avir Ahavir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaha Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Run your eyes. My subject this morning is Maya and illusion. And we might as well begin with the fundamental principle of the Vedanta philosophy, that is the ultimate reality. There is an ultimate reality called Brahman. The word real, this morning we're going to be using the word real. It's a sliding signifier. That means in a different context it means different things. In the Vedanta philosophy, the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, which is our framework this morning, real means unchanging. It's there in the beginning, it's there in the middle, it's there in the end, never changes. Brahman alone is real. And Brahman is often described as Sat Chit Ananda, that is, the ground of being here with a capital B, pure consciousness with a capital C, that is aperspectival, not self-consciousness, pure consciousness, and infinite bliss. Bliss doesn't mean happiness, doesn't mean emotional joy. In mystical literature, it means ecstasy, which means going beyond the separate self. Brahman, the ultimate reality, is pure spirit. That is, it's not matter, it's not mind, it's spirit. Spirit is by definition infinite. It has no boundaries. It is unlimited. It's infinite. And because it's infinite, there can only be one infinite. Brahman is defined as that which is one only without a second. That's a technical phrase here. Ekam evadvitiyam. Each one of those words has whole textbooks written on it, as defined by the teaching of this Vedanta, which is called the Advaita Vedanta. You know, in Vedanta society, we teach three different philosophies. One is called dualism, one is called qualified non-dualism, and one is called non-dualism. That's Advaita. We can imagine a mountain, climbing the mountain. We have different perspectives, different points of view as we ascend the mountain. We reach the top. The philosophy here is Advaita. That means non-dualism. There are two. There is only one. Now you may say, well, now wait a minute. As I look around me, I see very clearly that we live in a relative world. That is, the absolute is one, but the world of relativity, that is the sensory world of my experience, is many. I mean, that's the whole first thing I see, is multiplicity. And this world in Sanskrit is called the Jagat. That means that which by its very nature is ever-changing. That is, this is the world of becoming, of constant change and modification. And if you remember the 3 signs of being discussed by Lord Buddha, characterizing this world, we look around, we see that all is suffering, that all is transient, and that all is empty of any substance. And, well, you remember the Greek philosopher Plato. He had 2 famous images. They come down from those philosophical writings. One of them you're acquainted with, no doubt, the allegory of the cave, which is apropos to our subject this morning, but we're not going to discuss that. The second image is called the dividing line. Imagine a horizontal line. And on the top, now we're going to contrast. We're going to contrast the absolute and the relative. So we have the absolute, we have the line. The absolute, the relative. The one, the many. The real, the unreal. The divine, the temporal. And we can see, Plato goes on, he makes a long list there of contrasts between the absolute, Brahman, the ultimate reality, and the world of our experience, and the question arises, philosophical question, maybe the greatest of all philosophical questions. How did the one become the many? How did the absolute become the relative? If there's only one, and there's nothing else to act upon it, how could it change? How could that which is real, which is unchanging by definition, how could it become changing? It seems impossible. And therefore, we introduce our subject this morning, how this is explained by the teachings of the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, by the great Doctrine of Maya. Now, this morning we're going to be addressing this doctrine from one approach. It can be discussed, as we have done on other occasions, from many different avenues of discussion. This morning we're talking about metaphysical Mayavada. And this doctrine of Maya is that we're forced to kind of think rationally, to postulate some rationale for how the absolute became the relative. And therefore there is this doctrine that there is a mysterious, deluding, divine power that has made this all happen. And you see if you believe it. This is the doctrine of Maya. It's a very ancient doctrine. It appears in the Rig Veda thousands of years ago. Nobody knows when those ancient Vedas were written, 3,000, 5,000 years ago. And it appears in many texts of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. And it's often translated, that is, there's a line there in the Rig Veda that goes, Indra, through his power, through his Maya, appeared as many beings. That the one Indra appeared as many. And therefore the word is often, in these old books, is often translated as illusion. The Maya, translated as illusion, as magical, as magic, or as power. Sanskrit word is Shakti. So these are our words: illusion, magic, and power. That's gonna, how did the one become the many? Through the power of Maya. Now this power has two functions, as it's described by the first formulator of this Advaita Vedanta philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya. In ancient times, this power has two functions and two different modes. That is, there's two functions. One is called the Avarana Shakti, that is the veiling power. Something is veiled, for we look around, all we see is many. We don't see one. We see the relative world, we don't see the absolute. We see our own perspective. We have self-consciousness, but we can't even imagine what is pure, perfect consciousness. And something is veiling. There's a veil over that. If there's only one being, something must be covering it. And so the truth, reality, is veiled from us in the external, and when we turn our attention within ourselves, we know that the truth of our own being, of the God within us, that is, we're told God is in everything. We don't see God in everything. And we're told that the kingdom of heaven is within us. We don't see that. We don't feel God within us. Something is veiling. There's a veil. Something is preventing us from seeing it. Power. It's power. Power means push, pull. Something's pushing us, pulling us away. And that power is also, there's another power, which is called the Vikshepa Shakti. These are the two functions. The Vikshepa Shakti, the power to project. That is, it's not just that we fail to see the one, but in addition to that, we see the many. We see a whole world, of a multifarious world of creation all around us. And so we're forced to postulate some kind of a veiling power and a projecting power. Now, when we talk about power, when we talk about Maya Shakti, power doesn't function just by itself. We have to think about someone who has the power. I mean, there's not just power around. There has to be a being who wields that power. And in this Vedanta philosophy, the teaching is that there is a lord of the universe. He's called Ishwara. Ishwara is defined by his definition is the all-powerful Lord of the universe. Ishwara is the God of Vedanta. And Ishwara is defined as Brahman, that is the absolute, seen through the veils of Maya, that is time, space, and causation, which we can discuss on another occasion. How in Western philosophers they also addressed this subject of Maya, but they talked about it in terms of, explained it in terms of time, space, and causation. We're trapped in time, space, and causation. Seeing from our vantage point, we perceive, we know Brahman, we perceive Brahman, or we're aware of Brahman, but we see through a glass darkly. And therefore, our highest conception that we can have of the Absolute is that of the Ishwara, the all-powerful Lord of the universe. Ishwara is the Lord of Maya, the Lord of this. Through his Maya, through that power, he created this world. Ishwara is the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer of this world. You have to admit that there's a creator of the world. I mean, the world doesn't just come into existence. Yeah, that would be like impossible. It couldn't, that would mean that it existed before it existed. So you have to admit that something created the world. Yeah, there's a creator. It's just common sense. Something has to maintain this world. And in the end, this world will return in the great cycle of things. So the creator, preserver, and destroyer of the world. Ishwara sarvabhutanam hriddeshe junatishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra ruddhani mayaya in the Bhagavad Gita. It says that Ishwara, the Lord of all beings, resides in the hearts, deep within our heart, of all living beings, and there makes all the universe, through his Maya, makes the world of all beings turn as if they were mounted on a wheel. That's the old Sanskrit verse. That's long before the Ferris wheel. We can visualize the Ferris wheel as it goes round and round. That's the wheel of transmigration. How does it turn? Why does it keep turning? That's Maya. So Ishwara rules this world through Maya. When scholars discuss this idea of the history and the evolution of this concept of Maya, they inevitably return to a foundational, first they're trying to sourcing the source material for this idea. They go back most directly to a famous verse in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. And there in that verse it says, no Prakriti. Now here they're referring to an ancient philosophy, which is called the Sankhya Philosophy, where they talk about nature with a capital N. Vedanta, we believe in what we call naturalism. That is, naturalism with a capital N. That's Prakriti. No, the verse here says, no Prakriti to be Maya. And no Ishwara to be the Mayin, that is the Lord of Prakriti. And in another more popular translation, it says, know that this world is like a magic theater, and that Ishwara, the Lord, is the master magician who makes all beings projects all beings as parts of himself. Here we have the idea of magic and illusion. And you remember as you read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you know that Sri Ramakrishna was very fond of contrasting the great path of devotion and love of God with the other path, great path of knowledge, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. And he often said that you have to choose, right? Do you want to taste sugar or do you want to become sugar? These are your two choices. But he contrasts the two worldviews. The worldview of the bhakta, that is the devotee of God, is that this world is all lila, that is, it's the divine play. It could be described as a mansion of mirth. That's the worldview of the bhaktas. The jnanis, however, that is the philosophers. The philosophers of Advaita Vedanta, that is kind of our perspective this morning, their worldview is a little different. They view this world as a framework of illusion. And therefore we can contrast those two. You see which one you like. The mansion of mirth or the framework of illusion. And Sri Ramakrishna tells about the magician who came to, well, I guess a yogi, or a king, asked a yogi to explain to him or to describe to him the whole of the mysteries of this world in a single word. And the yogi said, yes, just wait for one little bit. And as they were waiting, a magician came there into the courtyard, and he walked up to the king, and he said, he held up two fingers like this. He said, oh, king, behold. And he took his two fingers like this. He waved his two fingers back and forth. And the king was watching, behold. And the two fingers just kind of merged into one. And he was watching there. And then the magician said, behold, O king, behold. He wiggled the one finger back and forth. And the king saw that now there were two fingers. And he came to understand the kind of the implication that there is only one, only without a second. And that now there are two, now we see many, but if we do spiritual practice, we achieve the ultimate, we perceive the one. But then if according to prarabdha karma, our mind then comes down to the relative plane again, then we will see the one will become two, and we will see that the one has become many. That is, we will see God in everything. And Sri Ramakrishna often talked about the jnani and the vijnani. Who sees the one, the vijnani, sees the one in the many. So the Sri Ramakrishna tells another story about the magician. And he went once, by the way, to see one of these traveling street magicians who had a small box like a magic theater. and you look into become the villagers. They come and they look through the little peephole, and there they see in the back there's some mirrors and there's some pieces of glass there, and the magician has an image there of the Lord Maheshwara creating the world. And so the villagers look in. Wow, there we see. Well, thank you, God. We're seeing how God creates. They believe it. They believe that it's real. And so Sri Ramakrishna, he looked there in that people. He said, wow, look at that. That's amazing. Look at that we see here. And then Mathur Babu, that is his benefactor, says, oh, very good. Yes, let's go. He gave that magician, gave him a pice. That means like a penny. And Sri Ramakrishna told him, what? He says, what do you gave him a penny? Here he showed us how God himself, he revealed God. See, he believed it. He revealed that God created this universe, and you give him merely give him one pice? Well, okay, here's another second story. Second story is a man. This is a story about the Jnanis. That is a king. The king was a student of Vedanta. He used to love to reason and to think and discriminate the real and the unreal. Nitya Vastu Viveka, the first step in the Vedanta philosophy. You have to be able to discriminate the real from the unreal. So that was his practice. And he had all around him courtiers and members of his court who were also interested in Vedanta, and they also were interested in reasoning like this. So one day a magician came, and he came to the king, and he said, let me show you my powers. And as he spoke to the king, he began to move himself away from the king, and the king gradually, and the court saw that there emerged a horse. And there was a horse. And on the horse was all this gold and silver saddle. And on the saddle there sat a rider. And the rider was the bright colored blankets on the horse. And the rider had coated in a suit of shining armor and holding a great sword. And like this the horse and the rider became galloping towards the king and the courtyard. And meanwhile, the members of the court, now they began discriminating. Now what's going on here? We know very well that the horse can't be real. And we know very well that the armor and the helmet can't be real. And we know very well there was no sword. That'd be a metal sword also must be real. Unreal. That can't be real. And all of the blankets, you remove all the trappings. The English word, trappings. It's an interesting word, trappings. I mean, they used to put bright colored like blankets on a horse. Kind of a decoration. Those were called trappings. When you remove all the trappings, what's left? They're discriminating. Now, the king is discriminating. What's left? The only thing that's left is the rider. He must be real. And sure enough, when that rider reached the king, all that remained was the magician. The magician alone is real, and all of the rest of it was unreal. And that's the fundamental teaching. The Brahman alone is real. And that all the rest of it is unreal. And now let's see where we're going here. you know, are acquainted, probably very well, with magic, stage magic, and even with modern illusionists. Maybe the most famous of whom was, what was his name? David Copperfield. Made the 747 airliner disappear. And with his body, all these electrodes on his body, and on this, all the news networks tracking him as he electronically as he walked through the Great Wall of China. Maybe you've seen how he got to the middle of the Great Wall of China. There he saw the bones of a Buddhist monk who tried the same thing hundreds of years before, but his mind failed him. As halfway through, his mind failed. So he was trapped in the wall. David Copperfield emerged on the other side. There he is. Oh yes, very good. That's the illusionist. Perhaps, however, the greatest of all illusions maybe goes back to old India. Where they talk about the stories, very ancient stories, hundreds and hundreds of years old, of travelers who observed and saw the famous Indian rope trick. Now the classical account, the Indian rope trick was a trick that was performed outside, outdoors, no special mechanics, no contraptions. All that was required was the magician was there, and he had a piece of rope, and he had a young boy who was his assistant, that's all. Gathered there in the open courtyard, and all the villagers gathered around him. And in the classic account, the magician takes the rope, he throws the rope into the air, and, I'm spending too much time on these magic stories here. I've got to get to the philosophy here. In any case, he throws the rope into the air. The villagers look out, it's going way up there. They can't even see the end of it. There it is. The magician says, "Boy, let's climb up that rope." The boy starts climbing up the rope. He climbs and climbs until he also disappears. Villagers look, they see him. He disappears up there in the clouds. Then the magician calls to the boy, "Boy, that's very good." He said, "Come down now." No reply. "Boy," no reply. And the magician becomes vexed. "What? You're going to spoil my magic trick?" He becomes very angry. Takes out a big knife. And he himself then begins to climb up that rope. Villagers are all watching him. They watch the magician. He climbs up the rope and he disappears. And then they hear sounds of an argument, some altercation, the commotion up there in the clouds, and some shouts and some cries, and then down falls a head, bloody head of a boy. Whoa! Villagers are shocked. They're stunned. They see that. Then what falls? An arm, and falls another arm, and falls a whole torso down, lands right there. Everybody's stunned and amazed. They're shocked. And then they look up there. Sure enough, here comes the magician. He comes down, carrying that big knife, climbs down the rope. He looks, stands there, looks. He looks around. He sees all those body parts. He goes over. He gets a big basket. Goes over. He puts a head in there. He puts an arm in there. Puts a leg in there. Then he puts his blanket over the basket and says the mantras, removes the blanket, and the boy stands up smiling, unscathed. All the villagers are stunned and amazed to see what happened. It's the Indian rope trick. No Western illusionist has ever replicated that. Let me tell you a story about once upon a time. There was a devotee of Sri Krishna, that is God. His name was Narada. And Narada was walking one day with his guru and his guide, Sri Krishna. And they were walking over hill and dale, and Narada asked his guru, Lord, he said, I don't understand this doctrine of Maya. Can you explain to me what is Maya? And Sri Krishna says, yes, you will understand. He said, by the way, it's very hot. We're tired of traveling, so let's just sit down here, rest a little bit. And if you could, please go and see if you can get me a drink of water. Oh, yes, revered sir. Narada said, yes. Sri Krishna remains there seated on the hill. And then Narada goes in search of water. He looks around. There he sees in the distance, he sees a village. Goes down. Goes into the village. Knocks at a door. And the door opens. And there is a beautiful young lady. And she smiles at Narada. And she asks, yes, sir, what is it that you're... Well, he's stunned. He's looking at her. She's so beautiful. He's mesmerized. Well, I would like to get some water. Oh, yes. Please come in. Be my guest. And so he goes in. They sit down. Please sit down. And they begin to talk. And they talk. And they talk. And they laugh together. And it was so... Well, Narada was just swept away. And he got an idea came into his head. He said, yeah. He goes, is your father here? He said, yeah. My father's there in the next room. He goes in the next room and he says, sir, he said, I'd like to wonder if I could ask you, can I marry your daughter? Father, you know, you can't ask the girl, will you marry me? You don't say that. You have to go to the father and ask him, can I marry your daughter? And the father says, yeah, well, who are you? Oh, you're Narada. Oh, yes, I've heard about you. You're an upstanding, you're a good man, you're a famous man. Yes, I think that'd be a good idea. Okay, very good. Well, they arranged a wedding. And Narada became happily married. And he settled down there in that village. He lived in a house. And he started a business there. He's a very good businessman. Very soon he earned the respect of all those villagers. And time passed, and a son was born to them. And the boy grew and grew. Almost a year passed, and another daughter was born to them. And they lived so happily there, the little family prospered. The time passed, and 1 year, the monsoon failed. That is the annual rains. The rains failed, for they were very diminished, and all the crops of rice and everything yielded a terrible year. And the harvest came, and there was not enough food. And the drought continued. And month after month, the drought continued, and the tanks dried up. The cows couldn't drink water, and the streams slowly dried up month after month, no rain. River bed began to run dry. And the village began, it was a disaster. People were beginning starving. Everything was dried up until the beginning of the next monsoon season came with full force, and the clouds opened and the rains came. And the rains came down, and they filled the tanks, and they filled the creeks, and they filled the river. The river filled, and it became overflowed, and it was a great flood. Nothing could stop it. Everyone was so dry. And that flood, the river rose, and it flooded over the land, flooded through the village, washing everything away before the flood. Narada sees his wife, seeing this terrible, we've got to save ourselves, save our children. Narada grabs his son by his hand. His other child has climbed up on his shoulders, clasping his wife in his other hand. They waded out into the waters. The waters were going so swiftly. that the one child, the child on his shoulders fell off. He cried out. No, as he cried out, he reached to save that child. Let loose of the other child. The two of them now are flowing in that river. He cries out, both hands free, let loose of his wife. She also was swept away. Terrible, what a devastation, what a loss. Now Narada himself was fighting for his life, fighting for survival of water, scrambling through the water. Finally got to the other side, crawling up on the side of the river bank. He crawls up little by little, devastated by this loss, wet, tired, exhausted, claws his way up the hill. And then he hears over his shoulder a sweet, soft voice. This voice of Narada. He said, where have you been? Where's my drink of water? You've been gone for almost half an hour. And so, that's how Narada learned about the nature of Maya. The nature of Maya. And let me quote you a verse here, just to go a little more quickly. Swapnamaye yata drishte gandharva nagaram yata tata drishtam vidam shrishtam vedanteshu vichakshanai. That's the verse. This is a famous verse from one of the old texts of the Vedanta philosophy. Here's the translation, as are illusions or a castle in the air, as are dreams or illusions or a castle in the air, so is the universe viewed by the wise in the Vedanta. That's the verse. As are illusions, or as is a dream, as is a dream, or illusions, or a castle, imaginary castle in the air. So is the universe viewed by the wise in the Vedanta. So we can ask ourselves the question then, is this world like a dream? Is this the teaching of the Vedanta philosophy? We say all this is Maya. Is this world therefore like a dream? Is this world a dream? Well, the answer to that is, of course, that's kind of ridiculous. Of course this world is not a dream. We know very well. We're sitting here. We are in the waking state. We're not in the dream state. We know what a dream is. We know very well what is a dream. And yeah, there are a lot of similarities. But nobody in their right mind confuses the waking state with the dream state. So this is not the teaching of the Vedanta philosophy, that this world is like a dream. And yet, what about this? The story here of Narada, it was kind of like he was lost in a dream, right? But that's not the interpretation that you're supposed to put on it. That is, he didn't fall asleep, and he's not just dreaming all this. That's not the interpretation. Now, another interpretation we could say of that story, it says in the verse, Swapnamayi atadrishte, that is like a dream, or an illusion, or a castle in the air. So then we could say, well, did then Krishna, who's the Lord, all-powerful Lord of Maya, Shakti, did he somehow, now if Narada didn't fall asleep, did Sri Krishna somehow put a spell on him? Are we under the spell of some divine magician who's made this world appear to us? Or rather, are we, let's put it a different way, put it in more philosophical terms, that is the doctrine of the I got time, I never go over. I've still got time. The doctrine of the subjective idealists, like Bishop Lord Berkeley, the most famous exponent in Western philosophy, that this world is a projection of the mind, but not of our minds, of our own individual minds, but rather it's God. We could say that God is dreaming. Can we say that? This somehow is God's dream, and that we're kind of like people in God's dream? Is that the philosophy that we're teaching here? Answer, no. That's not the right interpretation. Why? Because God doesn't sleep. God is defined, he's eternally awake. He's defined as pure consciousness. He doesn't fall under the influence of his power. He has a power, but he doesn't fall under the influence of that power of Maya, just like a snake. The snake has poison. The snake can bite himself, doesn't matter. He's not subject to his own. Other people may be subject to it. But God does not fall under illusion. God doesn't fall asleep and dream. And so that's not the interpretation. Well, what is the interpretation? Well, the interpretation is just what the verse says. Swapnamaye yatadrishte gandharva nagaram yata. That is, this world is like a dream. This world is like an illusion. It's like a castle in the air. That's the idea. How is it like? It's essential. In what essential way is it like those things? It's like those things because it is sublated by a higher reality. The teaching, fundamental teaching of this Vedanta philosophy is the idea of levels of reality. You can begin here with asatyam. That means absolute non-reality. That means something like the horns of a hare. Do hair have horns? No. You can't even imagine. The son of a barren woman. Can you even imagine it? No. Absolutely unreal. That's asatyam. Then there is another higher level. There's a first level, we could say, of some reality at least. And that's the pratibhasika satyam. That means the world of appearance in our dream. Now that has some appearance. There it is. At least it has some reality. It's not absolutely unreal. That's the pratibhasika satyam. That world, however, is sublated. That means it disappears. When? Why? When we wake up. When we wake up, we find ourselves in the vyavaharika satyam, a higher level of reality. In the Vyavaharika said that's the relative world. This is a relative reality. Everything is relatively true. It is a transactional reality. It's true for all practical purposes. In this relative world, there are three beings, the Jiva, the Jagat, and Ishwara. And Ishwara is you are real, and I'm real, and God is real, and the world is real. All these things are ontologically on the same level. Exactly the same reality. But there is another reality, which is the highest, that's called the Paramartika Satyam. That's Brahman. Brahman transcends all this world of multiplicity. And all the world represents the highest teaching of reality. Is this world then an illusion? We can ask. Is this world an illusion? That's our question. We said, Maya an illusion. We use the word illusion. Is the world an illusion? Well, not really. Because we use the word illusion as something like a mirage. That's what we mean by an illusion. That is, it's relatively, compared with a real city, there's a Fata Morgana, you see the illusory city. No, it's not like that. But if by illusion you mean something which is an appearance which will disappear, which is absolute, is this world an absolute reality? No, this is not absolute reality. This is relative. This is a relative world. Sanapya, sanapyu, bhatmekano, binapya, binapyu, bhatmekano, sangha, Hyanangapyu, bhapikano, madbhuta, anirvacha, niyarupa. That's the old Sanskrit verse. Quote the Sanskrit verse to show you that what we're discussing this morning is not a New Age philosophy. I'm not making all this up. These were discussed thousands of years ago. Shankaracharya says, what's the nature of the world? It's an ontological question, the fundamental philosophical ontological question about being. And the answer there is, you can't say it's real. What's the nature of this world? What's the ontology of this world? You can't say it's real, but you can't say it's unreal. And you can't say it's both real and unreal. And you can't say it's neither. You can't say it's one. You can't say it's many. You can't say it's one and many. You can't say it's neither. And that's why it's called Mahadbhuta Anirvacha Niyarupa. It is wonderful. That's Maya. The definition of Maya, it is wonderful and cannot be described in words. That's the nature. And so that's the teaching of this Vedanta philosophy. Shankaracharya says, I'll tell you the whole essence of Vedanta in a single verse. There he gives the verse, second half of the verse. He says, I'll tell you the whole essence of the teaching of Vedanta in a verse. No, he says, on second thought, I'll tell you in half a verse. And the second half of the verse goes like this, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Jivo, Brahmaiva Napara, Brahman. This is the essential teaching of the Vedanta philosophy. Brahman alone is real. The world is unreal. And you are that Brahman. Om Dyo Shantihi Antariksha Ham Shantihi Prithivi Shantihi Apa Shantihi O Shadaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shantihi Vishwe Deva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Saravam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Same Shantirehi Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.